Ow.
Watch the world from the sideline.
So I finally got to reading Normal People by Sally Rooney, which is a book that has got a lot of praise and attention over the last few years. Pretty understandable why after reading it. I mean, this book is sensational. I haven't read a book this entertaining and this powerful and emotional and complex, but also so simple and accessible in a long time. And I'm going to get into why I feel that way and why I think this book deserves every bit of hype that it's gotten. So for those that don't know, Normal People is a book about a relationship between two people, Marianne and Connell, and it just explores their relationship and how it changes, how it develops, how it deepens, how they separate between high school and coming out of university. It touches on themes of economic disparity, of politics, of social structure and social class, abusive relationships, mental health, power dynamics, all sort of encompassed in this one relationship. It's clear that these issues are things that Sally Rooney is concerned with, but she's able to put them in a story that feels so considered and lived in. These characters beautifully fleshed out. You feel like you know these people, and despite some of the controversial or frustrating decisions that they can make throughout the novel, you totally understand why they make their decisions, even if you don't agree with them. It challenges the idea of binary characters, or the idea that, oh, this person is one way, so therefore they're going to act this way. Which is not to say that the characters are deliberately unclear. Actually, on the contrary, they're more understandable because they are at times in conflict with themselves, and they have fluctuating levels of ego and insecurity and of sincerity and cruelty. The beauty of this book and the magic of this book is that it's able to unpack those thoughts and those feelings in a way that is understandable to the reader. And you can identify times in your own life where you're like, oh, I would have been someone who would have acted this way. But then you do. And that makes it so much more real than a typical work of fiction, which would establish a character's personality, go through the actions of the story and say, okay, this character is insecure, so they're going to act like this. Or this character cares about money, so he's going to act like this. Sally Rooney is such an intentional writer that she's able to have these characters with conflicting actions in a way that feels realer than fiction. You're never confused by a decision that a character makes in a book, or even just the behavior. It all makes perfect sense because of the way that she writes it and the way that we come to understand these characters. And it can be really frustrating. But it's not frustrating because you're like, if I was there, I would behave differently. I mean, it is kind of like that, but it's only because we are the outsiders. We're looking into a book and saying, oh man, if only they just communicated a little bit more. We can identify in our own lives times where we didn't do something that we wanted to do, or we didn't say a thing that we wanted to say, or we did do something that seemed out of character for us, or did something that hurt somebody else and we didn't intend to, or even points that we miscommunicate, or we misunderstand the intentions of somebody else, and that leads us to distance ourselves from those people, behave according to that misunderstanding. The easy answer doesn't always exist, and if it does, we're clouded by social, economic, or emotional influences that widen the gap and strain communication. The book shows us that if we could just clearly see into the mind of another person, then there wouldn't be this divide. From the outset of the book, Marianne is a character who's described by the people in her school as being weird. But from reading the book and having all of the information, we have a completely different perspective of her. We know that she has a drive for male validation, and that leads to her self-hating outlook, and that comes from her lack of male validation in her childhood. We see the violent relationships that she's witnessed and experienced in her life, and how that shapes what she thinks is supposed to be a normal or healthy relationship. We see Connell's financial insecurity, his mostly independent and work-oriented upbringing, which tells him that he needs to be able to survive any hardship alone, and his culture shock of moving away from where he's comfortable and liked, where he had, to value his social status as a kind of currency, and his frustration with Marianne, who has never been in a position where she has to worry about these things at all. Normal People is a book about the divide, that communication and understanding is the bridge, and that real love is a form of unspoken and impenetrable communication that will always find a way to flourish in our shortcomings. Multiple times he has tried writing his thoughts about Marianne down on paper in an effort to make sense of them. He's moved by a desire to describe in words exactly how she looks and speaks, her hair and clothing, The copy of Swan's Way she reads at lunchtime in the school cafeteria with a dark French painting on the cover and a mint-colored spine, her long fingers turning the pages. She's not leading the same kind of life as other people. She acts so worldly at times, making him feel ignorant, but then she can be so naive. He wants to understand how her mind works. If he silently decides not to say something when they're talking, Marianne will ask, "What?" within 1 or 2 seconds. This "what" question seems to him to contain so much. Not just the forensic attentiveness to his silences that allows her to ask in the first place, but a desire for total communication, a sense that anything unsaid is an unwelcome interruption between them. He writes these things down, long run-on sentences with too many dependent clauses, sometimes connected with breathless semicolons, as if he wants to recreate a precise copy of Marianne in print, as if he can preserve her completely for future review. Then he turns a new page in the notebook so he doesn't have to look at what he's done. I did watch the Hulu series after reading the book, by the way, and it's just fantastic. Like, it's such a good adaptation. I highly recommend both the book and the show. I'd recommend reading the book first because I think it gives you such a clear understanding of the characters. They do a good job of doing it in the show, too, but I just think there are some barriers that you're not able to overcome with that medium, because the book is more about the thoughts of the characters than about what the characters actually do. And in the show, they try to verbalize the thoughts that are expressed in the book, and they do a really good job of doing it most of the time. But I just think it's hard to beat the book, because it's the perfect medium for this kind of story and the way that it's written. It's a perfect book. I said it. It's a perfect book, and I'm so excited to read her other books. I'm hoping to finish her other books before her new book comes out this year. I'm going to try and pick up a happier book next time. No, I'm not. That's just a lie.